have our guest speaker, Professor, who will be giving us this all-important insight into a topic of management research. But before I proceed, if it's the first time you're joining us, please, I will urge you to continue to engage with us, because it's a wonderful opportunity for academics to come together to learn from each other as well. We have a lot more to share, but I'll leave it. I don't want to keep going because we have only limited time. So I'll hand over to the chair of this seminar, Dominic, to carry on. But please do stay with us until we finish. Yeah. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Ata Boachi. We are privileged once again to have our guest speaker, Professor David Sarpong. Professor David Sarpong, as we are all aware, is a professor of strategy and organization at Aston University. He's widely researched. He has a wide range of research that most of us have been privileged to benefit from. And in academia, he's one of the well-known researchers in the area of strategy and organization. So without much ado, I will welcome Professor David Sarpong to present to us this evening. Prof, over to you.
All right, so thank you very much. A real privilege to be with colleagues this afternoon, and I decided to present some stuff I've been working on, which I call, I've titled Microstoria. Basically, this is a huge research program I've wanted to launch in terms of developing some of these ideas into papers, and most importantly, into a methodological frame. It's been some time now, and this is the second time also I'm presenting it. So it's an opportunity to help me to kind of rethink some of my own assumptions and how to present this stuff in a scholarly way. So I will be welcoming some questions and interjections, and hopefully some suggestions that I could leverage myself to develop some of these ideas that I'm presenting today. So I understand I've got an hour, so I'm going to really try to stay on time so that we can have some fruitful discussions afterwards. Right, so I'm asking Microstoria, the new 10 in management research. So is it a new 10, or is it something that has been with us for some time now? But the reality is, I will say, if you look at any of the management journals, especially in the area of organization studies and stuff, what you will find out is a shift. There's been a bit of I wouldn't call it a paradigm shift per se, but if you look at the materials they are publishing and the kind of funding applications that is being granted, you will see that there's been a massive shift to give some voices, or give some opportunity to those polyphonic voices that has been subjugated over the years to tell their own stories. And that is what I want to talk about today, so that colleagues who are working on the peripheries, or who potentially have an eye on some of the people located on organizational peripheries or low down organizational hierarchies, could start to rethink how they could potentially theorize the observations and stuff. But it's an opportunity for us to tell the story of those voices that have been subjugated, particularly in management research. So, what then is Microstoria? To me, Microstoria is all about the stories of little people. So people live lives under the microscope. So whenever I say Microstoria, think of it as lives under the microscope. We're bringing people's everyday situated practices, their lives under the microscope, to study the details of it, to help us theorize everyday social life. But I want to cast your mind back a bit. If you look at these photographs, the first one is basically pygmies. So pygmies we normally, in our language, we refer to them as motia, isn't it? So motia, those dwarfs
But would you
Then-
mind to do slideshow, because it seems it's not slideshowing yet? So.
Oh, really? Because if I click here, that ends the slideshow. Am I still sharing?
Yes, you are still sharing.
Click on slideshow.
Okay. So is
If
it
you
in
click on
slideshow?
slideshow, yeah.
It's on slideshow now.
And then click on the beginning so that we get a full slide.
Yeah, this is the first slide. Yeah, so this is the first slide. Is that okay?
Yeah, it's fine.
I think, yeah, it's fine. Seems that's what we can get.
Okay. Okay. So you will see this pygmies, motia, where very short creatures who live in the forest. We've heard so much stories about them. Their pharmacogenical skills and all the stuff that they do, especially when it comes to plant medicine. We understand they've got some bit of magic wands. They have their own cities and stuff that they live in. And if you go into history, those in North American stories where they talk about potlatch system and so on, they also have stories of these pygmies in North America. And you can see those short men with all those beard who also live in the forest and stuff. And the last bit is a photograph somewhere in, I think, Dakota or somewhere. I picked it up somewhere where they have these houses and stuff in the forest, which they believe that these pygmies used to live in. So you can see someone is kneeling down trying to look at this house. This is a complete house, but obviously you can see that a normal human being cannot live in this house, and it's only pygmies. And there's been a very long time where we try to understand what these people do. We hear a whole lot of stories, and we really don't know what they do. And what actually brought me to this is the story of this lady. We call her Nana Obuotebiri. So if you are from the Koforidua area and you were probably born in the 70s like myself, somewhere in the 80s, you would have heard about the story of.
I will please plead with you if you are not with a microphone, just mute yourself for us, please.
No, somebody have to mute them. These days, that is what people do. If you advertise a program like this, they pick the share codes and stuff, and they try to get in. So whenever they get in, somebody have to just close them down.
Yeah, they've been muted from my end, but occasionally.
Yes. So just be on guard. Immediately they come in, you just mute it.
Yeah. Okay.
Right. So Nano bought a break. So was informed to or something at Koforidua ISDA, and she had actually asked her teacher she wanted to go and use the bathroom. She went and she never returned. And after a while, everybody got concerned. They went to the bathroom, and she was not there. All they saw was her clothing, everything, and nobody could find her. I remember one of my friend's dad was actually arrested on suspicion of abduction because the lady, my friend's dad was their landlord, and his parents, they have just moved to the house. It was a huge case. Then after 30 days, 40 days, 60 days or so, the draft brought her back. And that time I didn't go to school. We all went to meet her. We went to see the magic. And you can see, and it's a very long time. And she's now the residence fetish priest for the Koforidua stool, the Obuotebiri shrine. So many stories about Nana Obuotebiri, what she could do when she went into the dwarf land, the kind of food she was eating. I understand she was eating honey and what else? They eat bananas and groundnuts, and the dwarfs will take her into the forest and show her all kind of concoctions, some plant medicines that could help her to cure people and so on and so forth. And we've had so much stories about these dwarfs on the Waterbury Mountains. And when I was a child, we used to have a land there, and we used to go to the farm with my grandmom and stuff. And I was always looking out. I wanted to see one of these dwarfs. And on occasions, I would go with my friends to the bush. We wanted to see them, but we could never see them. And the reality is, there's no way you will see them. They believe to be spirits, and they live in the forest, and they do all this wonders and stuff. And we've heard a lot about them. It's all about assumptions and what they do and their stories, and most of them don't add up. But the reality is, we believe in the existence of these dwarfs. And for a very long time, of course, the kind of stuff they do is not very scientific. It's one for the charlatans, and nobody will care to know about them. And we hear these stories, but we never get opportunity to probe them. And the idea of Microstoria, I would say, is very much similar to the story of these little people. Because they are invisible, because nobody sees them, they have a whole lot of powers that will help us to improve our social lives, to improve our everyday situated practices in terms of healing and so on. But we're not making use of them because they are not located within the traditional realms of organizing. They are not located within the traditional realms of knowledge acquisition and so on. And of course, because we can't see them. So seldom do we hear from these dwarfs. And what I'm trying to do here is to draw analogical parallels with the story of these dwarfs to coming into our regular organizations. In organizations, there are people who are located at the lower end of the organizational hierarchy that we seldom speak to, we seldom talk about. And all of us being researchers, if we go into an organization to research, we are very much interested in the managers. We are very much interested in the middle managers, the TMTs. Who cares about those people who are located at the base of the organizational hierarchy? The assumption is that the locus of managerial knowledge, everything lies at the top. But the reality, we also know that some managers are as stupid as some of us know. To some extent, those of us who are located at the lower end of the organization, they have strategic insight into the organization's operations. There's some of the stuff that a watchman may know or a cleaner will know in an organization. You won't believe it. But the reality is, if we go into those organizations to ask about how we could improve their value creation, capture potential, and so on, nobody will talk to the cleaners. And I want to draw on two examples here. The first one is the story where there was a hospital in the north of England, somewhere in Newcastle or something, where they were having a lot of problems with neonatal deaths. So the number of children who were dying in the hospital was getting out of hand. And as usual, the NHS, they form a commission, whatever, a commission of inquiry to try to understand why the neonatal deaths in the hospital was very, very high. And as usual, you will got a panel who came to the hospital, and they met all the doctors, spoke to them, they spoke to the managers, they spoke to the nurses, trying to find out what is happening, what is the problem, and so on. And the meetings were going on. One of the panel members was a smoker. So he had left the meeting room. He was going to get a quick fag. And when he went to the smoking hut, a lady popped up who was coming to clean the place. And they strike a conversation. And, oh, so what are you doing here? Oh, well, we understand there's been lots of neonatal deaths here. That's why we are here. I'm on a panel. We're trying to understand. And the lady, the cleaner said, oh, that's interesting. But I feel you are from Glasgow, are you? I can see from you. I said, yeah, I'm a Glaswegian. They were having a conversation. Then the woman said, well, did you say you guys are trying to find out why children are dying here? He said, yeah. That's what we're doing. We've had meetings upon meetings. This is the third meeting. And the woman said, I know why. Then the guy said, how do you know? He said, well, I can tell you. He said, you don't know. What do you do here? She said, I'm a cleaner. He said, yeah, you don't know. I said, yeah, I know. He said, okay, so what do you know? She said, well, I work here as a cleaner. Every morning when I come here, the number of stabs, the smoking stabs that I find in this hut is incredible. Which tells me that most of the nurses don't really work properly in the night. So the night shift staff, the nurses, they just keep smoking. So if you count the number of stabs they leave in the morning and calculate by maybe 2 minutes of smoking one stick, you will realize that most of them are spending additional 3 hours or whatever outside. And nobody could find this out until this woman mentioned that. So the next day they came out and checked the stabs and they found loads of stabs. And that is what they used to kind of in a traced in a linking trace fashion, found out that because the nurses were staying outside smoking for a very long time. And clearly that is how they found that the problem with the neonatal deaths was got to do with care in the night. And that is incredible. So you can imagine this is a woman who is just a cleaner. Traditional research will never speak to her. Surprisingly, she is the one who had the answer to this neonatal death. The other one I want to think about is the story of the London Underground. So you got the London Underground. We all know the sounds, especially in the summer, coming. And what they will normally do is to oil the tracks to reduce those friction sounds and the noise. And there is this guy who had been employed to oil the tracks. And normally you'll need, he was told, he was specifically given probably, let's say, 100 mil per yard or whatever that he has to put on the tracks. And the guy, in his own wisdom, thought that the 100 mil was not enough because whenever he put on 100 mils, he still got to hear loads of noise. And whenever he puts around 200, 300, the noise actually subsides a lot more. But the reality, the reason why we were normally putting on, yeah, obviously was to reduce this noise and also help to improve the longevity of the tracks. So because he was putting 200 on, the noise had reduced most of the time. And most importantly, within 2, 3 years, TFL was recording amazing profits because in the last 2, 3, 4 years, they were not changing tracks because the tracks were still as good as you can think of. And everybody thought, the managers, everybody thought they were doing well, isn't it? And nobody knew where the reality was until the guy retired. So new persons come in and they were putting the right amount, which is the 100 mil per yard. And here we are, the tracks started, going down and they had to replace them and profitability went down. So in trying to understand what was the problem, well, what was actually happening, they found out that it was because the guy was putting a load of oil on the system. That is why the tracks were not replaced regularly, and that led to profitability. The question then is, should we take the guy's job as strategic? Because normally actions and practices in organizations that we call strategic are those that helps in the creation and capture of value. And they are normally located in the work of managers, in the work of top management teams. And this is someone who is paid some £10 per hour or something. And here we are, the organization's profitability actually lied in his situated practice, routines, and activities. So clearly, there is a call, there is a need to give some voice to polyphonic and subjugated voices that we have not listened to when it comes to strategy work or when it comes to theorizing in organization, because these two stories tells us that people who are located at the very end of the organizational hierarchy, people who are even located beyond the theoretical boundaries of the firm, may have something interesting for us to help us in developing and creating and capturing value. So what then Microstoria means here is the creation and sharing of what I call contemporaneous storylines by a group of people whose polyphonic voices are often subjugated in objective discourse. So beyond the theoretical boundaries of the firm, if we're thinking about people whose voices are subjugated in objective discourse, I'm thinking of women, I'm thinking about migrants, I'm thinking about people of different sexual orientation, I'm thinking about the charlatans, I'm thinking of Prophet Ubinim, I'm thinking of Kumchacha, I'm probably thinking of my own pastor who is based in Kumas. What's his name? The nation's prophet. And we will come to these guys in a second and you will understand why we may have to go back to the basis to give a voice to some of these voices, because if or Pam Boy is saying anything at all, we don't take them seriously at all. But we will see in a second why Microstoria will argue that we should be listening to source people to help us theorize social life. So when we're talking of Microstoria, it then becomes a persuasive strategy to manage key stakeholders. So you've got various stakeholders whose, like I said, whose voices are subjugated because they are located beyond the territorial boundaries of the firm because they are not powerful. If you are not a powerful stakeholder, then obviously you are never listened to. But Microstoria as a methodological frame should help us to get to speak to these people. And like I said earlier on, it could be used as a tool to shape public discourse. And so, in this sense, it could be used to respond to public situations that are very difficult when the organization finds itself in a very difficult place where, for example, when the organization is in the news for the wrong reasons, for example, a microstoria could be very helpful in responding to such public situations that may compromise the legitimacy and reputation of an organization. So, why Microstoria and why is it that important and why do we have to pay attention to Microstoria? Especially those of us of African heritage, I think there's a call on us to start to think about Microstoria as a means of working. And I pick up this interesting African proverb here, which talks about the lion. So he said, until the lion tells a side of the story, the tale of the hunt will always glorify the hunter. So we all know that the lion is a great hunter, fantastic hunter. But the lion has never learned to write. And it has been the how do you call it, the hunter who has been writing stories. So if the hunter is writing the stories, then there is no way the lion will be put in as the protagonist who is the greatest of all hunters. So if the if the lion wants to be heard, then the lion has to start to learn to write its own story. And some of us, because of our own embeddedness, if we want the African story to be heard, if we want those polyphonic voices, subjugated voices, and those groups that we belong to ourselves sometimes to be heard, then some of us will have to start to write our own stories because you don't expect our colleagues from other continents and other places who are not directly connected to our cause, the kind of stuff that interests us, to do the talk for us. And that is the call for Microstoria. So it's about I call it prosopography from below. So the purpose is to basically elucidate what I call historical causation on the level of small groups where most of real life takes place and to open history to people who will be left out by other methods. So existing methods will always leave out other people when it comes to recording history. Think about the story normally taking on the Western pedagogical approach, taking on the Western style of narration. Think of it when we're talking about, let's say, even the history of South Africa, because um, Western storytelling kind of prioritizes or ontologically give primacy to one leader. It tells the story of Nelson Mandela, presents him as the greatest of the great, the guy who go apartheid, who helped South Africa to break away from apartheid and so on. But the reality is, it's not just Nelson Mandela. There are so many market women. There are people, Steve Biko. There are so many people who also did so much, who could tell us a whole lot of stories. The market women also were involved in the struggles and so on. But the reality is, the bulk of the emphasis is put on Nelson Mandela. I'm not saying Mandela didn't do a lot and so on, but what I'm saying here is Microstoria because it is prosopography from below. It gives us the opportunity to hear the subjugated voices, those market women, those people in the township as well, who also in their own ways contributed in helping to stop apartheid. And it comes back to the way we theorize every day in our profession. So when it comes to entrepreneurship, a lot of emphasis is put on the great entrepreneur. The entrepreneurship stuff that we teach every day is all about the great Steve Jobs. It's all about the great how do you call it? The who somebody like I would say the Virgin Media guy, a great entrepreneur and so on and so forth. Yeah, emphasis is put on making those people great. And nobody talks about entrepreneurs who are basically on the peripheries, those barefoot entrepreneurs here. I'm talking about the guy who is sitting on the incinerator in Accra collecting bottles, is he an entrepreneur or not? Because the reality is this guy is collecting bottles for the rubbish dump. He's selling it, making money, looking after his children, everything. Is he also an entrepreneur? He is, but he's a barefoot entrepreneur. But the reality is, because we put a lot of emphasis on, entrepreneurship as the great man and stuff, we never talk about the stories of those people, who are the base of the pyramid, who are beyond the theoretical boundaries of the firm, who are struggling, who are subjugated voices, and so on. But the reality is, if we go to these people, we can learn a lot about entrepreneurship from them in terms of resilience, in terms of courage, and so on. So the idea of Microstoria is a commitment to a micro-analysis of agency. So you prioritizing the agency of those people that has been subjugated. Yeah, the power of the small to clarify large issues. So you're now going to talk to somebody who is working for Zoom Lion. How do you call it? Cleaning the gutters and so on, yeah, and making money around to try to understand their social lives, to try to use that to theorize the working lives of the Ghanaian people and so on. So it's about exhibiting new possibilities for writing, rewriting, and writing gender history, especially literary history and global history to some extent. The strength of Microstoria.
Sorry, Professor Sarpong. I think we've got request from the audience. If you can move your slides for us so we can follow through to where you are.
Okay.
Thank you.
So the strength of Microstoria is also about the local ways of knowing, which are normally rendered illegitimate. So it put emphasis on people that we would normally want to talk about, like the charlatans and people in the Bali news and so on. The focus is on non-elites here. So think about it. In Microstoria, we're interested in people whose voices have been subjugated as opposed to, the elites. So we are moving away from the elites, the managers, the top managers, and so on. The emphasis is on contradictions and more of the raptures of everyday life. And to some extent, it's about a clash between the subordinated and the dominant class. So because a lot of emphasis is put at the top, what we do in everyday lives, we as academics, and we don't look at those other, especially business and management academics, where we are not looking at those who are dominated. But the reality, like I said earlier on, if you look at the kind of papers that are being published in most of the organization studies journals, including human relations and stuff, you will see that there is now a shift, emphasizing, people at the lower end and people who actually are located within or beyond the theoretical boundaries of the firm. So it's about indigenous people, it's about women. So we're talking here about ethnic minorities. And here I talk about witches, day laborers, peasants, charlatans, people who are nobody, the millennials, and the disenfranchised. And other little people. So the move is away from the great man narrative, where it's all about Steve Jobs, it's all about how do you call it, Virgin Media guy, it's all about, yeah, I'm in Ghana now, so I can talk about the KK Sapons and the Despite and so on and so forth. We want to move the narrative away from those at the top to those who are down, for us to be able to create many histories from below. So we can see here, when it comes to the emphasis on lived and living conditions of those involved, and in business and management, like I said earlier on, this is where the scholarship is moving to.
Sorry again, Professor Sarpong. It looks like your slide is still static on the second one. There are comments that...
Just a second. So it appears...
If you can reshare the slides, that would be
perfect. Okay, so I have to probably reshare because I've said a lot. I've been moving and moving and moving.
Yeah, it's not changing from our end.
It's not changing from your end. Okay, so if I share...
Excellent. Yes.
So if I go back, so this is where I am now.
Yes.
Can you see?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so if I go back, I'm going back now. It's not moving back, isn't it? Sorry. It's not. So it's still not moving back.
I think if you click on slide show, and then you click on the current one, that should be moving with your flow.
So just a second. I don't know what is happening here. So I'm going to stop again. So let's see. Oh, sorry about that. So all along it's not been
all right.
moving.
Maybe stop sharing and then reshare.
Yeah, that's what I'm doing now. So stop
Okay.
and share. So I've reshared. If I move,
It's moving now. Yeah.
Yeah,
it's
But
moving.
it's moving now. But if you want to try the slideshow,
yeah,
might be
slideshow
that
will
would
be
be better.
perfect. Yeah, slideshow at the top.
At the top.
If you
Yeah.
go to the windows at the top, and then
Uh-huh.
you have animation, slideshow, record, and everything on the left.
Just a second. It appears what I have on is more of my regular slide. So right. Okay, so let's see.
Yeah, that's right.
Yes,
Slideshow.
and then go to current
slide.
from current slide.
From beginning. Okay, so I'll go from
From current slide, yeah.
Current slide. Yeah, that's
Is it working?
Just give it
No,
a moment. Sometimes
hit again. Yeah, hit again.
Sorry about
You
it's still
click
the old
again
one.
and let's see. Yeah.
Oh, that's a shame. So
it might be the Moatia issue, but then it's not a big deal.
yeah.
We are enjoying your slide, so Professor, you keep going. If you can make it a bit bigger, if you go to where you can just enlarge the slide a little bit.
Yeah, because I've got somebody with me here with a phone and she's checking in. We're not moving at all.
Yeah,
So
it's not
I'll stop
moving.
sharing
It's
it.
fine. We will.
We've got an option. I don't know whether what we can do is I can send it quickly as an email.
And
If
then I
that
can
works.
pick it up. Yeah, if you send it to me, I can pick up and share.
Yeah, if maybe
Yeah.
that will work that way. Sharon.
Yeah, I'll be on standby.
Open your email and use it to send it because I don't have access to my email. So 1 second. Email yeah.
Or perhaps we could continue the lecture and then we can share the slides with us later, or so that we get
So
the flow. Then we can
if I
yeah, so
compose
yeah.
and attach. Macho email me say 1 second. I think I'll be able to send it.
Dominic.appear.
So
Dominic.appear.
So Dominic
.appear at rhul.ac.uk.
Oh, me Macho. Dominic dot.
Yeah, .appear.
Appear. Yeah. At Royal Holloway.
Yeah, rhul.ac.uk. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So send.
Whilst waiting, Prof, for you to carry on, can I just interject a little bit?
Because we don't.
Can I just ask a question before you move on?
Go on.
Yeah, just a quick question about what I'm trying to put together from what you said regarding the silent voices. So in Ghana, for example, we have these people that you are talking about, the ones that the subjugated voices are not actually subjugated. They're making a lot of voices. They're talking. So it's not kind of that, but the fact that they are talking a lot, bringing in a lot of ideas. How will you put these ideas? Because when you're talking about strategy has to be value-driven. Don't you think this can actually create noise if we allow these voices okay, to be heard without actually looking into the significance of these voices, rather than just allowing it because of the sake of providing a platform for different voices coming in, because I'm thinking about not making sure strategic decision processes are not convoluted, because there is the need to refine, information. So how will you put that in the context of your argument regarding the unheard voices and subjugated voices?
Yeah. So it appears it's working now, isn't it,
It is
Sharon?
working, yeah.
Yeah, it's working now. So I will leave it like this. I will not change the system. So Rexford, I'll pick your question later. So let me continue quickly then.
Okay.
Yeah. So like I said, the focus is on non-elects and the emphasis on lived and living conditions of those involved. So you can see here, very typical. You've got a barefoot entrepreneur in India collecting bottles sitting on the incinerator. These are the people whose voices have been subjugated. They are also entrepreneurs. But like I said, whenever we're talking about entrepreneurs, we want to talk about those who are making the millions. You can see women in cocoa farming industry and stuff.
It appears we have a bad network now.
So in that case, if anybody has a question, Mr. Chairman, if you want to, Dominic, if you want to ask people to send their questions, that would be helpful so that we maximize the time, if that is the case.
Yeah, well, if you have any questions, you can still go ahead and put it in the chat. But whilst we wait for Professor Sarpong to rejoin, I think we can have any discussions that we want to have around. So, Dr. Atapwachi, I think you were making a point regarding people at the lower end of management who presumably make some noises. Would you be able to elaborate on that so that we will be able to pick that up when Professor Sarpong comes up?
Right. What I wanted to ask mainly is about strategy. Strategy is about adding value. In organizations, we all have the idea that in terms of the value proposition, it comes from different diverse, aspects of the organization. For example, we have something called client symbolism, where clients normally, when they buy from you all the time, when there's a loyalty, that is telling you, it's a signal in effect that you are actually providing something that they want, and they want you to keep doing that. So it's good to do service, to listen to their side of the story. So in that respect, I understand. But when it comes to the idea of bringing in other aspects in terms of maybe the laborer or we have employees union where they can have a platform to kind of provide a solid, because it shouldn't be too many voices. When there are too many voices, the tendency is that there will be noise in the system, because we cannot actually just take any information from anywhere, because strategy has a limit. Although we have to involve a lot of information from every corners, the stakeholders can bring in all that. But we need to hone into the key vital information because of time and money and cost, so that we can actually optimize those information rather than allowing ourselves listening to so many information from everybody. So I just want him to clarify that as time goes by.
Thank you so much. I think we have Professor Sarpong back online.
Hello. Yes.
Okay.
So
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Rex. I've taken note of your point, so I will re-elaborate that on the question and answer time for Professor Sarpong to pick up. Thank you so much. Okay, over to you, Professor Sarpong.
Okay. So if I move to the next slide, I hope it works.
Yeah.
Sharon, is it working? It's not working. Okay. Just a second. Yeah, it's working. Right. So in Microstoria, the idea of going for Microstoria, like I said, is to tell the story of this little people. And if you want to tell the story of this little people, then it's about mobilizing differential visions, but also getting stakeholders to really appreciate what is it that you are trying to do. And if you think of it in terms of classical rhetorical theory, when you're doing Microstoria, there is a bit of ethos involved. There's an ethical appeal involved because you are calling on society and you say, look at this group of people. Their voices have been subjugated. They are polyphonic. They don't have anybody. We should go and talk to these people. They are part of the organization because no matter whatever the decisions we take in the organization, in as much as they are located at lower end of the organization, we know managers are paid to make decisions for them, but there should be opportunities for these people to also speak up. In traditional strategy research now, the emphasis have moved on to middle managers. You could see that for a very long time, middle managers were not even included in strategy making. It was all about top managers, and middle managers were the ones who were simply asked to implement the strategies. So the idea of going for this classical rhetorical approach is to appeal to the ethos, is to appeal to the how do you call it, the ethics, the moral ethics of society to get them to have a second look. It's also about the pathos. So pathos here, we're talking about the emotional appeal. When it comes to Microstoria, it's all about emotions. It's all about speaking up for people who have never the chance to speak up for themselves, speaking up for people who are weak, speaking up for people who are not located or located beyond the theoretical boundaries of our traditional organizing, and that they would never have the chance to be spoken to. And if I go back, you could see the migrants, you could see the Galamsey people, you could see the market women, you could see all this group of people. And emotionally, most of us are attached to them. They are our husbands, they are our wives, they are our sisters, they are our relatives. And that is why we will have to appeal to the emotions. And so when it comes to writing up Microstoria, you will always want to speak from the position of the agent, give agency to this group of people, and get them to tell their own stories in unadulterated fashion. Most importantly, it's also about the logos. The logos here is the logical appeal. The fact that it's a story, every story has a beginning, it has a middle, and it has an end. And here we're talking about contemporaneous storylines as narrated by polyphonic voices. So now you bring in these people who have never been the focus of traditional research, who have never been involved in management research, who we've never cared about. You're bringing them to the center and getting them to tell their own stories. And it is our responsibility to arrange the stories in logical, coherent, persuasive, and succinct ways so that it could appeal, to stakeholders. It could appeal to the people who are supposed to make changes, to appeal to the emotions, and of course the ethos of those people who are supposed to make the changes. Arrangement and style is important. So as a writer, here, because you're giving a voice to this group of people, we have to step back to some extent and allow the polyphonic voices to speak up for themselves. But as a researcher involved in Microstoria, you will also be involved in narrating their story, telling it for them. So you are an advocate to some extent. So the arrangement and style, the way you present ideas here, will be a bit different from the traditional ways of writing management research. So, in terms of theorizing, so now if we have to theorize Microstoria, I've gone to speak to some female migrants who have been living in the UK for some time about their propensity to get into professional occupations and so on and so forth. And I went in using Microstoria here because these are women whose voices will seldom be heard because of their intersectional identities. So one, they are women; two, they are black; three, maybe they don't have higher qualifications, or maybe if even they have higher qualifications, remember they have children, they are married, their intersectional identities make it so difficult for them to assess opportunities and so on. And if you go in there and you listen to their stories, now it is your responsibility to tell the story. And in telling the stories about theorizing, our work is about theorizing here. So when you pick the story, ontologically, you are managing and organizing, isn't it? The emphasis is about how these people manage their social life, how they organize themselves to assess those opportunities that you are looking for. So epistemologically, you are exposing the power relations and the question of the dominant views through. So what is the dominant view? What is the dominant perspective about those Black female migrants, of their huge intersectional identities, making it difficult for them to assess opportunities? The axiology here is the value constituted research, and the typical methods for microstoria will always be qualitative methods. Again, you think about it in terms of ontology, you have flux of processes, so experiences are in flux and transformation. So in theorizing microstoria, we move away from institutionalism to treating practices as something that is in flux. So it's more about relationalism as opposed to methodological individualism. So it's about the relations between people. So the people, here I'm talking about those what lower agency and how they interact with everyday institutions as well as themselves and society as a whole. So epistemologically, again, we show you truth to be produced, to be a product of ideology, isn't it? So we are now saying, look, the reality is people talk about this young female migrants, whatever, that maybe they are lazy, they are this, that may be the dominant narrative. But look, the truth, the reality is that their past experiences as well as their intersectional identities make it extremely difficult for them, to move through professional jobs and so on. And so you're telling the truth against existing ideologies. Axiologically, you, the researcher, and the research are embedded in power relations, isn't it? So you will have to really try to come to their level as a microhistorian, somebody who is telling the story of this letter of people. You have to come down to their level, so that they will be able to tell their stories in unadulterated fashion. Remember, it's about the construction of text and reality. Yeah. So they tell you a story, you've got the interviews, whatever. They are narratives, and you have to deconstruct them. Yeah. So you are deconstructing their stories vis-a-vis their reality of social life. Yeah. Again, ontologically, socially constructed through power relations. As I said, the focus is on closeness, silences, and repressed meanings and voices. Remember, we've got repressed meanings and voices. So these are the voices, these are the meanings that are not really observable to the unprepared mind. And our job as people who are focusing on microstoria is to shine a light on some of these stories, some of these absences, which a lot of people cannot see. So some research narrative are repressed and silenced at the expense of others. It's about in-depth investigation of silences and those absences. So a bit of the theorizing here. So you can see from the ontology, yeah. So ontologically, we talk about managing and organizing and flux and processes. Then epistemologically, it's about exposing the power dynamics between the poor and the rich, between the dominated, yeah, and the elites. Axiologically, it's about value constituted research. It's about being embedded in power relations and so on and so forth. The moving, Sharon. Right. So prosopography from below. The purpose is basically to elucidate what I call historical causation. So where were we before we got to where we are? And here your emphasis is on this small group of people that you are going to use to try to theorize to explain the realities of so many people. So we recently did some work on which has been published in the International Journal of Human Resource Management. And we called it Moving On Up. And Moving On Up was about the experiences of migrants getting into professional occupations. And obviously, we were focusing on West African migrants, very typical microstoria, who were actually in professional occupations to try to understand how they managed to get their way to go in there. That doesn't necessarily mean that people don't get into professional occupations, and that doesn't necessarily mean that the story of these people represent the entire story of all Black people. But the reality is, opening up to these people give us the opportunity to try to understand their social wells and how they navigate their ways around those boundaries and stuff to get into those professional occupations. So it's about where the real life actually take place. It's about getting people to be open to tell their own stories and challenging existing narratives about those group of people who most of the time whose stories will be left out of the traditional narratives. Remember, because Microstoria is all about narrative, because it's about the story of little people, because it's about a bit of an unconventional method, because getting to these people can sometimes be even very difficult. Most of the time, the traditional methods will mean they are never being reached. And Microstoria then allows us to use alternative means to get to those people who are frequently left out of this traditional research. So it's exceptional. And in terms of it being exceptional, I want you to think of it in terms of EDIR. So equality, inclusivity, diversity, and respect. So it's an opportunity to shed light on people's experiences on these things. It's normally qualitative exploratory, because seldom do we know, yet seldom do we have a lot of work drawing on Microstoria. So you normally start from an exploratory perspective. So you go for exploratory qualitative research. So you can have some ethnographic interviews. So it's a bit different from the regular interviews where you find people in their situated practice and have a chat with them and get them to tell their own stories in honest, backdated fashion. And because Microstoria is all about narratives, I want you to think of Microstoria as a way, especially when it comes to analyzing the data, as analyzing regular narratives. So what I've done, or what I plan doing in teasing out this methodological frame, is to draw on the general narrative inquiry. And here I'm using the Reisman one, 2008, to try to combine what regular grounded theory to help me to tease out, especially because it's qualitative and you will be forced. You can't just go and say, I've done Microstoria and I've done interviews or whatever, and that is enough, because you will have to show how you analyze the data, and you analyze it that you just can't go and say, oh, I did grounded theory. Then the next minute they will ask you, then what really makes this Microstoria? It's not just about the people you are interviewing, but it's also the stories being contemporaneous and being told by these people who are the core face of everyday experiences that you are trying to theorize. So I've got the narrative inquiry frame, which is attending. You combine what basic grounded theory, that will be the attending is more of the coding, the open coding that you do. Telling us about the initial coding, then you got transcribing, analyzing. That is when you read the theoretical categories that you normally use to develop your findings. You got the reading, which is more about the theory development, and it's more through induction. So what we actually doing here is an iterative method, which we are combining both narratology and that of everyday grounded theory to try to analyze micro stories. Right. So Microstory then provides opportunity. So it's a call for people to come on board to tell the stories of these people that nobody will talk to. Earlier on, I was talking about Ejilo Binim and all those people. Ejilo Binim, everybody thinks he's a crazy guy. Yes, Obinim is crazy, but if this man can have 2,000 or whatever, 3,000 followers who are prepared to give him so much money, and this guy is built the most successful, a successful church. He's got loads of money and stuff. Then obviously we cannot write him off. What can we learn from him? Is there anything at all that we could learn from Obinu that could help us to theorize social life? We can't simply go and say we want to get those women to stop following Obinu because they are crazy and they are giving their money to this guy and he's telling lies and so on and so forth. How come those people are following him? Yeah. So we're thinking about the migrants, on Calais trying to get to England. People are dying, and the government keeps talking about taking them to Rwanda and all those kind of rules to help to get people not to come. But the reality is Microstoria. Going to these people, can we understand their situation? Microstoria is what will get us to get some of these people to tell us their own story. So it's an opportunity to tell the stories of the small people you care about. So it may be that the small people in your village who are working in cocoa farms and stuff, you care about them so much. You think they are not getting enough. And Microstoria is your opportunity to give them a voice, go and talk to them, and put them in an international journal, and the whole world will get to know about them. It's about gaining access to a hidden population, which is normally overlooked by traditional research programs. There are some communities that me and you can actually get access to, interview them, yeah, get them to tell their stories in ways that no other of our colleagues can get in there because of the communities in which they are embedded. So recently we've started some work on visa overstayers, for example. People telling us their stories about being visa overstayers. And you think about it, getting to this hidden population that actually don't want to be counted already is very, very difficult. And in this case, maybe an ethnic minority, maybe an African, trying to get to some of these Africans becomes a bit easier. We're able to get these people to talk to, whereas other people will not get a chance to speak to. So it's a fantastic opportunity to gain access to such a hidden population. A chance to empower these polyphonic voices. Yeah, give them a voice, subjugated, get them in objective public discourse. Come, let them tell the stories because at the moment we don't even know what is going through people's head, why they will want to risk their lives on boats, small boats, inflatable boats to get to England. All we say is all the migrants are coming here, they want to come and get jobs and they want to take jobs and this. But there is a lot more to that. And Microstoria provides us the opportunity to understand the mentalities, the motivations, why people will take those risks. It helps us to unpack the clashes of the subordinated and the dominant class. So, how society works sometimes very complicated. We all know the clashes between managers and those at the lower end of the organization. There are demonstrations everywhere. Yesterday in Ghana, there was a demonstration at the Ministry of Lands and Forestry and Mines, and I think it's about Prestia Mines. The workers there are complaining because the company is being sold by. It used to be a government company or so, but it's been passed on to a private equity company, and they think they are not doing very well. So they went to the ministry to demonstrate, and when the minister came out to collect their petition, someone had was pouring water on the minister, and it was in the news all over the place. And you can see some of these clashes of the subordinated against the dominant class here. And how do we tell some of these stories? How do we get this miners, at Bogoso somewhere, to tell their stories? They don't have any accounting skills, they don't have any management skill, but these people are saying, look, our firm is not being managed well, and that government should come and save us, and so on and so forth. Is it that they are not receiving their salaries? It's just that would definitely not be the story. That is not all. But it's probably because the social contract of that organization used to have with the community has somehow been undermined by the new private equity firm that is taking over and so on. So Microstoria help us to unpack and actually make such locations and clashes available for people to see. And finally, it's about collecting data. And Microstoria is great, especially those of you who are migrants and stuff. There are some communities that other people cannot get in. You can collect data anywhere, anytime. It's cheap because it's at the individual level. You can get into those groups easily and collect data and try to tell the story about the people that you care about. So I will stop here for now, and hopefully I can stop sharing and we can have conversations about this methodological framing and how we could potentially exploit it to craft some interesting research that could help to change the lives of people whose voices, I keep saying, have been subjugated in objective discourse for a very long time. So thank you very much. I'm very sorry for all the problems with the slides and stuff, but I hope I'm on time, and I hope we have some time to have some conversations. Thank you. So I'll stop sharing, then hopefully I can see your faces.
Thank you very much, Professor Sarpong. That is an interesting presentation. So whilst you were trying to get back on track, We had Dr. Atabwachi, who had an interesting question, and I think he was mainly focused on the fact that with time, if management or senior management, as you put it, allow the people at the very bottom who form the basis of the Microstoria group to make noises, that could also steer management or senior management off track. So if I'm right, Dr. Tabuachi, that is what you want.
Absolutely. So thank you very much, Dominic. My main point, first of all, very interesting presentation, full of important takeaways, which really very puts me as a researcher as well. I'm beginning to look into key issues such as the cost aspect, because strategy is about in this day and age, company strategy prioritize profit. If we are talking about sustainability issues, I 100% embrace the idea of polyphonic voices and subjugated voices, given all the narratives. The issue here about bringing this into perspective helps the entire kind of extend the social construction argument. So that is fine for me. But if I'm talking about strategy in the context of business, businesses are looking into profits. They don't have time. They are always looking at cost and benefits. And from my perspective as an accountant, I am trying to put figures around everything that you are saying. Okay. So going back, micro history in itself has always embraced, doesn't embrace, the idea of giving, minority voices, because in olden days, we know the chief is always the supreme. You go to them, you have to see the linguist. You don't even speak to the chief straight away. So there are other intermediaries that is trying to kind of identify the important voices or whatever it is that is so nitty-gritty for you to send to the boss. So bringing that into context, I mean, drawing insight from this micro history perspective. Nowadays, there is this kind of management structure where the top will always want to listen to the key voice that will add to profit, rather than just these, polyphonic voices that will not add value to the organizational, kick. So will you kind of put a context to that? How will you convince management, let's say in the boardroom, that let's go back to the workers, listen to the laborer, listen to the, how will you convince them to go down to the margin of the organization to take voices? I understand the data aspect, which is absolutely awesome. And that for the last slide, I really like it because I want the data part can help. But how will you contextualize the benefit in terms of cost and benefit aspect of this whole argument of Microstoria?
Yeah, thank you very much. I understand. I know you are an accountant, so you always trying to how do you call it? Do the bean counting a bit, not in a derogatory way. But then, right. So the idea of Microstoria, what we're saying here is in terms of if we take the traditional organization, we know that strategy has been dominated for a very long time, has been dominated by TMTs, top management teams and managers. And in the last 10, 15 years, the emphasis changed a bit. We started talking about middle managers, for example, who never had a chance to make any input at all into strategy, to the extent that they are the ones who have to implement them. And for that matter, it's always problematic. They are never able to implement them properly because they have never been involved from the onset. Then over time, we move on to strategy as practice and stuff where we're talking about routines and activities and what people do and so on and so forth. And that is where we started moving down to the meso level too, that if there's a possibility to include middle managers, then there should also be a chance to include people who are located very down the organizational hierarchy, who historically would have never been involved. So think of it, when we start strategy, the starting point has always been basic internal analysis, basic external analysis. So where we try to understand the strengths and weaknesses of the organization, the resources that we are using to compete, and so on and so forth. And bringing, other people in, getting those voices in, shouldn't cost the organization a leg. At that point in time, at a very basic level, where we are trying to understand where the organization is in terms of its position vis-a-vis competitors, vis-a-vis stakeholders, and other people. So the idea of Microstoria is just to give a voice to everyone, and think of it in terms of everyday scenario planning and strategic planning exercises. When I go into an organization as a strategic foresight planner, strategic planning expert, what you will normally do is to meet the managers of the organization, try to understand the history, what is happening in there, and so on and so forth. The next thing you do is to go to the people on the ground, go and talk to them. What do they think about the organization? Where do they want to see the organization? In the next 10 years, their future visions of an organization and so on. And that should help you to understand the existing mental models of the people working in the organization vis-a-vis the managers. Because the idea here is to get everyone on the same plane, mobilize differential visions. And in mobilizing differential visions, which is the very first start of the strategy process, getting to listen to every single person in the organization is very fair, and it means people will feel part and parcel of the strategy. They will know it is their own product. They will know they have an input in it, and it makes it very easy to implement such strategies. Beyond the organization, what I'm emphasizing here is that there is a whole group of people that traditional research have never been talking to. Yeah, obviously because of access, which can be really problematic. Think of it when I mentioned the issue of those migrants, visa overstaying migrants, for example. Think about the witches, the charlatans, and all those people that traditional research has never gone to speak to. So for that matter, we've discounted their ideas. That is the story of the little people I started with, those dwarfs. Because we don't see them, we don't hear their voices. Meanwhile, we know, or we've been told, that these people have some fantastic ideas, pharmacological ideas, and
Okay, it looks like we have a break in communication from Professor Sarpong's end. So, Carly, I've got your hand up. Whilst we wait for Professor Sarpong, maybe you could give us a sneak preview of what your question should be about, and then when he comes back, we will relay that to him.
Yeah, of course. My question was really around strategy turn. We started to notice recently that we're witnessing strategy emergence through social-cultural practices of practitioners within organizations. So this is basically what I'd like to ask about and emphasize on strategy emergence from below rather than top-down.
Right, okay. So
right,
we
Doctor, sorry.
Yeah.
If I may, I mean, I know you got Priestley's hand, but if he comes and you want to chip in, just following up on the earlier question, that if you want to cast the net, how wide are you going to cast it in terms of relevance? Because I mean,
absolutely.
I'm sure people with the quantitative head will find it quite. I'll end it there for now. So maybe add that to it if you can.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, Fred, thank you so much. I mean, hopefully you'll still be around to screw that on Professor Sarpong's head. It's big on my head at the moment, so
that's fine.
Okay, thank you very much, Carly.
I've managed to come back. Can you hear me?
Okay, all right, great. So if you summarize that for us, we have a follow-up question from Dr. Yamwa, and then we have Priscilla with a question again. So if you want to summarize that quickly, and then we'll get
and Kylie as well. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. So that is it really. So the call is to get those people that traditional research has never listened to. So I don't want you to think about the organization alone, go beyond the theoretical boundaries, of the organization itself, and you'll see that there are so many people outside that we've never really been talking to them, and for that matter, we've not given them the chance to tell us their stories, which could help us to improve their lives and social policy as a whole. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. So, Carly, if you just give us 2 minutes, I will get the follow-up question from Dr. Yamwa, and then I'll come back to you.
Okay, no problem at all. Thank you.
All right, Dr. Yamwa, yeah.
All right. I mean, I have many questions, but I wanted to just take advantage of the first one just to follow up. Now, Prof Sarpong, I'm privileged because this is the second time I'm listening to you.
Yeah.
I mean, you came to my place, Burbeck, if you quite remember that. Yeah. I'm just asking as a follow-up. So, how wide would the organization cast the net?
Well, in this instance, if you think of it, I hope we are not putting ourselves in a box when we talk about if we are doing organization studies, for example. So if you're an organization studies scholar these days, it's not just studying organization. We study organizing as well. So you study people who are located beyond the theoretical boundaries of the firm. It might be cooperatives, it might be individuals, like I showed earlier on, those migrants, those people sitting on the incinerator picking bottles, those female migrants trying to make a career, those gay and minority ethnic people in organizations struggling to make a headway, and so on. So it doesn't necessarily have to be within the theoretical boundaries of the firm. So that actually responds to also the question Rexford was asking earlier on. When you look at Microstoria just as, just people located at lower end of the organization, then it becomes a bit limited. I think its power actually lies beyond the organization to include those people who have never been heard.
Right, Dominic, if I may, just a quick follow-up there. I mean, as you presented, my whole thinking was that if you look at the narrative and you look at it from, let's say, entrepreneurship, how people with these micro ideas, we can find what they're doing and scale it up, that could be interesting. If you look at it from economic development, for instance, I mean, it's a huge, so I just want to end it there. I've got other questions that with time, when I get my turn, I'll ask. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Fred. We've got Carly. Priscilla, I promise I'll come to you when we are done with Carly. Okay,
hi,
Carly.
everyone. Let me introduce myself very quick. I'm a PhD researcher at Newcastle University, working with Professor Charles Harvey.
Say hello to Charles.
Yeah, sure. Professor Sarpong, don't you think that we are witnessing recently strategy emergence from below rather than from top down? When I say from below rather than top down, I mean through practitioners' social-cultural dispositions, through their experiences. In my research on third sector organizations, I'm really witnessing existence for refugees and asylum seekers in the organization. I'm witnessing a space for innovation of employees where they can use their own subjective resources, such as language skills, cultural experiences. I'm also witnessing lived experience as a key driver for organization and social stability. I'm witnessing adapting and co-creating through lived experience. Would you give us a little bit your opinion on this from strategy in practice perspective, please?
Okay, thank you. So there has been a new trend, and that's what I said. If you look at the papers being published in organization studies, human relations, and stuff these days, they are much more interested in these micro level issues and actually having groups that traditionally, seldom do we talk about them. So refugees, for example, as you mentioned earlier on, these are people that we seldom have the opportunity to listen to them. And the idea of Microstoria is now give the microphone to these people and put them on the stage and let them tell us their story in an unexpurgated fashion, in their own words, in their own ways. And we as researchers will then give those voices, amplify them. And amplifying them is about developing these stories into what I say coherent and persuasive narratives that could help to influence policy and basically help to improve the livelihoods and situated activities and practices of these people who for a very long time have been neglected. So it's a call to arms, really, to go back to the people that some of us really care about, to talk to them. So I am a migrant. I've got a tortoise, I would say, a very difficult immigration history. Myself, I went to school in Germany, and I have to move to the UK, and you go through all the processes, and I know that there are so many migrants who are struggling in these spaces. Nobody is hearing them because we all know the discourse on migration has been hijacked by the right and to some extent, the politicians, and we don't hear some of the stories which could basically change policies. And if we can start to rely on some of these stories rather than stuff coming from the Migration Observatory Society, who will just come up with all this funny statistics, people are reduced to statistics and so on, without us having opportunity to listen to them, then it becomes problematic. So that is a call to arms, and I think it's attracting a lot of or it's getting a lot of traction now in organization studies, and like I said, human relations. They're talking about slavery in value chains, they're talking about migrants, relational interdependencies, and so on and so forth. So it's a great idea what you're doing, and I think you'll be proud of yourself, being the person, giving a voice to people who have never had one at all.
Thank you very much. My second very quick question is, in my second paper, I'm studying how refugees and asylum seekers are managing and organizing their own resettlement process from a management and organizing standpoint, okay? And I already collected my interviews, and now my question is, what would I gain from if I adapted Microstoria as methodologically? What would I gain something that I don't have if I just followed thematic analysis for my interview?
Normal interviews, and
yeah.
So the idea of Microstoria, so we're saying the stories of little people. So these are contemporaneous storylines as narrated by subjugated voices. So contemporaneous storylines, you converting people's stories, their livelihoods into storylines to tell. And we all know stories have coherence. They have a beginning, they have a middle, they have an end. So it's a story you are telling. And when you say you're using Microstoria, it then gives you a whole kind of methodological frame to protect yourself, not just from reviewers, but also to make your work much more exciting. To say, look, I'm looking at absences, stuff, making some of the stuff that are not very obvious much more, clearer for people to understand and people to hear these polyphonic voices. And it does make it interesting. It does give you a frame, and it makes it a bit different also from the regular narratology and regular grounded theory that everybody's doing. So you are combining two strands. You combine a bit of grounded theory, you combining narrative approach, and it becomes something of a hybrid, and it makes the work much more interesting. We've done a few we have one paper which was published in Work, Employment and Society in 2017 on service nepotism, where we talk about Microstoria. We have one also in European Urban and Regional Studies, where we look at West African migrants who were living in other European countries. So naturalized third country nationals. So a Nigerian who moved to Germany, lives there for 10 years, got a German passport, and decided to move to the UK. And we wanted to understand their experiences. And that is very typical. These are people who it's very difficult to reach. So they are naturalized third country nationals. They are Europeans walking on the streets of London. You see him, you think he's a Nigerian. He sounds a Nigerian. He He walks like a Nigerian, eats like a Nigerian. But the reality is he's in the UK as a Hungarian. And we wanted to understand why will some of them leave those utopian, how do you call it, social services in Denmark, in Sweden, in Netherlands, in Germany, where you give you accommodation, everything, to come to the streets of London to suffer because our social services is very poor. Nobody will give you housing. You know, the queue, we don't have any housing. You pay rent, you know, £1,200 in London, you know. So how do these people actually make it then? Because you are moving from Netherlands or Germany to the UK. If life was so good for you in Germany, why are you coming to the UK? And you come into the UK where you have to pay £1,200, £1,500 rent in London. And if you had that £1,500 where you have to pay a deposit, that would be £3,000 just to start. If the person had £3,000, then he would have lived in Germany then. But what we're seeing is that people are still coming. So how do they make it? How do they do it? And this is very typical. We get these people to tell us their stories about their travels and so on and so on. So it's a great opportunity. And like I said, there are some specific groups that are very hard to reach, very difficult. And for that matter, people we will never get to hear their stories. Think about some of these refugees. A Syrian refugee, if you are sitting with her and asking her stuff, she will tell you everything. If Charles should meet any of them, they won't tell Charles. Some of the things they are prepared to tell you, they wouldn't tell Charles. The Africans I met, some of the things they would tell me, the things they did to get their documentation sorted, they will never tell any of my white European friends. So it is my job now to go in there and get that data and tell the stories of these people. And that's exactly why
I do agree with you. I'm a refugee myself.
Absolutely.
And I found this, what you're saying makes sense. Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
This is amazing.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Professor Sarpong. Priscilla.
Yes, thank you so much, Professor Sarpong. That was really quite interesting. My question is, how does that differ from case study? So, for instance, if you do research where you go and interview these people who are minority groups or vulnerable, how is this approach different from that sort of case study approach?
Okay. I'm not sure your take on what constitutes a case study in this instance, but think about it, like the work we did on those naturalized third country nationals, which has just been published in Human Relations as well. So this naturalized third country nationals, I am looking at those of West African heritage, so those from West Africa. And that becomes a case study on its own, isn't it? So West African migrants, and here again, a case study, I'm specifically looking at guys who are Africans but hold European passports, not UK passports, and who have transitioned, moved to the United Kingdom. And so obviously the idea of a case study also runs through here. This is a case study of a specific group of migrants. I think the issue of Microstoria is about the methodological approach. How I'm not just going to ask them questions about when did you come here and what did you do or whatever, but to get them to tell us, to actually convert their lives into narratives, into stories. So basically, it's about their stories. So we are starting from how they got their first visa and they came to Europe. And that time he went to Greece first and he managed to get to Germany. He lived in Germany for 7 years. He has to learn the language. He couldn't study there. And he then brought the wife and whatever. He got a visa. So we're going through all this and trying to get a picture of the entire story, then come back to the move to the United Kingdom, what actually got them to think about even moving to the UK. They're living all their estates. In Germany, they will give you a flat, everything, it's not as expensive. Life in Germany, we all know the quality of life in Germany is much, much higher than the UK. These are people who have German passports. They've got everything. So why will you live that's kind of Ethiopian social services in Denmark or in Norway and stuff to come to the UK? I'm sure we can easily say, oh, it's because of the language, whatever. But remember, these are people who have lived in Germany for 15 years, 20 years. They've got a German passport, they've got everything. And they have to move in. There's a lot more in there. And again, remember, coming to the UK, they all coming to look for work. We're talking about work, but you need £3,000 to survive in London, to get a rent and stuff. And so you got all this paradox and stuff. And how do they do it? How do they make it? Live all that and you come to. If you had £3,000, you would have stayed in Germany then. So you come into London. So how do they make it? How do they organize the whole process? And that is the idea of telling the story. We see them on the streets every day. You see somebody, a Somalian guy walking around. You think, oh, he's a Somalian. No, he's not a Somalian. He's actually a Dutch. No, he's a Dutch. And you want to understand, oh, so if he's a Dutch, why is he here? Because you think of it, or he's a Norwegian. Most of the Somalians are Norwegians. They are friends and stuff. And a totally different group of Europeans. They are European. That's why we call them naturalized third country nationals, but they're also nationals of. So that is why it's a story. It's much more about a story and how we present it.
Thank you. That makes a lot of sense. So it's not just about asking questions in sort of like semi-structured interviews, but allowing them to tell their story and drawing the narration from that discussion.
Exactly.
It's interesting. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Professor Sarpong. We go to Karen. Karen.
Hi. Thank you, Professor Sarpong, for that. It was wonderful. I think my first question will come from when someone says that, suppose someone said he's using the full grounded theory approach. It starts off with even going to the field and not knowing what questions to ask. You start getting to know what you ask after you started speaking to the people. So let's say someone said, I was going to use this lens you're talking about. At what point would the person consider, so would I go into that field? For example, I say I'm going to look at dwarfs or these kind of very subjugated people. At what point am I going to start theorizing? Do I go to the people with a preconceived notion of, okay, I'm going to ask along this line of question, or I go there, I just find myself, if let's say I'm using an ethnographic study, I find myself in that community and I start to derive things that make sense from that community. So at what point would you say this, because you've been talking about it from the angle of it being a methodology. So I'm looking at it from, can someone adopt it as a full methodological approach, or just a section of it? That's my first question. My second one is, someone would say that what people who criticize this approach will say that it is very focused on, very granular and very particular. People will call it, it's very focused on things that are very particular. It's not very generalized. And so someone would say, in using this methodology, how would people kind of like bring the gap between these smaller facets? Because for example, I'm talking to dwarfs, if I'm talking to this group of people, how am I able to transcend this understanding from that micro level to a bit of macro level, considering I'm a global firm? And that could be quite expensive if all I'm going to be doing in the international market is looking at granular stories of people. So how does that transition work, and how would I be able to work on that? I think those are my two questions.
Yeah. So in the first instance, remember, the emphasis here is about people who have been left out by other methods most of the time. Yeah. So these are people who've never had the opportunity, people to be spoken to. Again, come back, think of it of all these illegal migrants and migrations and stuff, and we hear all the stories, whatever. How many times have you heard the migrants, being brought in for them to tell us, what is happening here and there? We don't know. So it's all based on conjectures and obliviousness about the experiences and lives of these people. So the idea is to shine light on people who have been, to some extent, left in those crevices. People that as far as I keep saying, that traditional research have never really paid attention to them because they think they have no value at all. Yeah, they are not important. Some of them are not visible, obviously, because already they are illegals. They don't want to be seen. How do you get that person to interview? or talk to, and so on and so forth. That is one. So our work here is to shine some light on those group of people whose stories have been, forbidden for a while, not just because they are minorities, but also because they are not visible, and we want to make them visible. In terms of the analysis bit, when it comes to the grounded theory bit, well, we wouldn't want to go into those arguments about grounded theory, whether people go in there what preconceived mind on grounded theory in this purity. They say you just go for the data and you try to understand and see whatever you can find. But the reality is, whatever data you go with, you will still need some preconceived, but you will still have a research question to try to understand what is happening in there. And that Western defeats the idea of grounded theory in its purity. So it's gotten its strength and weaknesses here. And most of the time when people write and we all talk about grounded theory, I don't think we mean it in its purity as in I'm going there without any preconceived ideas. You have research questions, you've got theoretical boundaries that you set everything doing the work. What the idea of grounded theory here is that you are going to allow the data to speak for itself, as opposed to you imposing your frames on. But it's not about you not coming with frames. You have frames, but you don't. So, for example, me getting the data, going to interview these people. I'm a migrant myself. I think I know a lot about why somebody will come from Europe to this place, isn't it?
Yeah.
When he's got European passport, I would think I know a lot. That is assumption. But going into these interviews, the idea is the grounded theory part being that I will have to suspend all my imaginations and what I know about potentially why people will move from Netherlands to this place, and try to step back, sit back reflexively, ask people to tell their own stories in an honest, mediated fashion. And that is when you will realize that you may have so many false assumptions, and you will end up identifying stuff that you would have never thought of, as opposed to you going in there thinking, oh, this is what I'm good. So since sitting here, I remember when we were trying to do this work, you could sit here and say, oh, the reason why people will come, oh, they want their children to maybe study here. Oh, because there are no jobs in Germany. Oh, because they couldn't speak German, And when we went to speak to these people, you realize it's totally different. It's
But
about
my
kinship.
But my question really would come in where, because from what you are saying, you're speaking as, for example, you are experiencing it, and so it gives you like the advantage to start off this kind of study. That's for someone, let's say if I'm doing a migrant study or whatever it is, considering the person is not someone that has lived that experience. I don't know if I'm getting it wrong. Maybe I'm correct me if I'm wrong. Would you say that someone who has not experienced a particular situation, or not necessarily like maybe I'm a migrant, at what point would you say the person is actually looking at this particular piece of work from a microstoric lens? At what point is it? At the point of when
You don't necessarily have to have experienced those kind of stuff at all, in no way. I talk about that just because, yeah, I'm a migrant, but you just have to be interested in that group of people. That is one. Yeah, you want to give them a voice because you know they don't have a voice. Then two, you got you got the idea of access, yeah, which can be a bit political, like I said. Think about it. With these stories I'm talking about, West African migrant, Nigerian, whatever. If you meet any of them and you really sit them down and you ask them, they will really tell you a lot of stuff because they know you are also a migrant. And you understand their language. They because you share the same social collective identity, religious syncretism, cultural syncretism, and so on and so forth. Whereas if my colleague, a white colleague, goes to try to speak to some of these people, there are some of the things they won't tell them. We all know. You won't tell them. You wouldn't. Even you sitting here as a Ghanaian, if somebody comes here and they want to interview you about your life in the UK and so many stuff. Yes, you will try to talk to them, but obviously, if I'm interviewing you, there are some things you are likely to tell me that you wouldn't tell other people, because you are more comfortable, you share the same social collective identity. And that's why I say sometimes we have to tell the story as the lions here. We have to learn to write. Other than that, the story will always favor the hunter. The hunter will be the best hunter in the world, because other people have to write for us. And that is why sometimes we have to step up. If you have shared experiences, then it makes it even great and much easier, much interesting to do the work. But yeah, there are so many issues, especially in the area of migrants and all this kind of stuff, refugees and so on and so forth, that most of the time we have to do it. I had a student last year who did something on, she used tactics of the week, this and she was trying to understand how Black women, migrants, women, how they craft their careers. And she's a Black woman. It was quite interesting. And when you read some of the transcripts, the stuff people will tell her, I doubt, if any of my colleagues, white colleagues, meet people will tell them that. And also her ability to get into those groups and get them to speak, they're getting access and so on becomes much, much easier. And yes, we are the only people who can tell the stories properly in this sense.
All right, thank you very much, Professor Sarpong. I think we will go to Dr. Yamwa for our last question. Dr. Yamwa, if you're still online, please.
Did you receive the slides? I tried to send you the slides, Dominic. It didn't come through, did it?
It didn't. I haven't received it. I've checked my spam.
I'll
it is
try
still not in there. So
that's
all right. Prof.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Thanks so much. I've got bits and pieces. Maybe I have to come and see you, so that, because I mean, what I'm getting at, having listened to the talk the second time, and then recalling some of the questions, it seems to me, if it was a quantitative thing, I'll say, okay, run it alongside the other quantitative methods so that it gets its kind of home where it can embed. Because I mean, if you think of grounded theory, ethnography, and case studies, it seems that they've got some bearing. So this is kind of a general kind of observation. The other thing that I think is still a sticking point for me is that if you look at bottom of the pyramid, it has received some research. Philanthropy has received some research. And it appears to me that even when you take it from the macro point of view, it may be more well received within a more socially kind of oriented society. If you go on talking about the segment, one thing that to me is key will be making a business case for Microstoria. Because let me put it to the forgive me, those of you who don't understand the account. Even back there, they said, what's I don't know if you want to comment on that.
Absolutely.
Excellent.
And when you do Microstoria, you become like a lawyer who is going around courts and police stations and trying to be a friend of the courts, helping poor people who don't have any money, who don't have any representation, and trying to support them. And yeah, we are just looking at good cases. You're going around, poor guy, he's got a very good case. He's not being heard because he doesn't have representation, and that is what you want to do and shed light on. So yeah, obviously those people, because they are poor, like you said, their voices have been subjugated. But in recent times, with a whole lot of emphasis on EDIR and stuff, what you realize is there is a bit of a space that has been given for this kind of ideas for us to hear from people who historically, like think about the gay community in recent times. The number of papers that has been published on gay people in the workplace and they are all in that kind of tradition, because these are people who have not been heard that much. And surprisingly, you will be surprised that most of our colleagues who identify with those communities are the ones who really write on them, and because they know them, and they have better experiences, they can have access, and so on and so forth. It's kind of the same kind of core here. So if you know you can have access to women in Sefi Bekwai or whatever, in the cocoa sector who are struggling, and you want to talk about women in the cocoa, in the value chains, for example, in terms of slave labor, all those kind of stuff, then you want to go there and talk for the people in your village, basically giving them a voice. So these are people who traditional research, people talking about the value chain and stuff, optimizing the value chain and all those kind of stuff will not be interested in. But when people started, putting a light on them, we all know these women's cases have now become huge. And I also mentioned earlier on the case of the stigmatization of artisanal mining, for example. Today, if you are a miner, a galamsey guy in Ghana, you better off tell someone you are a criminal. When someone meets you and asks you what you do, probably you tell him you are an armed robber. They will be all right than you telling them that you do galamsey. So if you do galamsey, you are both an armed robber. You are everything. Yeah, but the reality is, think about it. Some 20 years ago, this was a job that was socially approved. People go to Takwa and stuff, find their fortune, do galamsey. And over this period, the occupation has been stigmatized. And there is call to understand how the process of stigmatization has occurred. How did we get here? And these are all interesting, micro stories where you could go into the community itself, and the community people will tell you the activities of the micro galamsey people, which has made them criminals and stuff. So until we give voices to those people in Takwa villages and stuff, we wouldn't really understand the phenomenon and so on. So Microstoria is what is happening is actually I need to write this, actually. That's why I was keen to talk about it again, because some of the questions here helps you to refine and kind of think about the ideas. I'm thinking of writing it into a methodological test, a kind of a methodological framework that people could employ. So that's why I've got the, how do you call it, the classical narrative stuff, and how you can the analysis, then the, how do you call it, theorizing and all those sections, so that I could write it into a paper, kind of like how somebody did grounded theory or whatever. But this is nothing really new, because I'm just pulling up ideas, like you said, from ethnography, a bit from narratives, a bit from here, to kind of develop a new kind of research methodological framework. So give me some time, please. By the end of the year, hopefully.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you very much. I think we've picked up all the questions that we have. There is one in the chat box, which I would do that for a last question. Yes, that resonates so well with advocacy in law, especially human rights law. So, Professor Sarpong, can one do interdisciplinary research in strategic management and human rights with a focus on Microstoria? That is
absolutely. That's why I said I have to develop it into a methodological framework that anybody can come and pick it and say, my methodology, I'm doing, how do you call it? So this is a research that took on an exploratory qualitative approach, because very little work has been done in this area. And I took on a Microstoria approach. In Microstoria is about the contemporaneous storylines as narrated by subjugated voices. Such subjugated voices will be people who have not been the focus of traditional research, and the context of this that's fitting there. Then methodologically, so then you can, so that people can say, yes, I'm using Microstoria. That's what I'm supposed to do. That's so if I can write this into a paper, then publish it in any of the methodological journals. Then everybody knows yes, yes. Then my life is so hard. I've been postponing, but hopefully this time I hope I can start to put things on paper and really start to tease things out and write it and if I'm lucky and it can become a salient methodological frame, then hopefully people can use that.
Okay, thank you so much, Professor Sarpong. From a grounded theory background and standing on hope, I am looking forward to the substantive theory that you finally derived from your research. It's something that I hope to read at some point. So thank you so much, Professor Sarpong. It's been very
and
interesting.
thank you so much for coping with me today. The technology has been a bit difficult. I'm in Ghana. I'm stuck. I'm enjoying myself at the Department of Chemistry in the FG Toto building. It's been lots of fun here. Thank you very much, and best regards from Accra. I will see you next week.
Enjoy the heat and bring some.
It's incredible.
Yeah, but before we go away, can I just say thank you very much again, Dominic? Just a quick thank you to everybody who made it a point to turn up for this. Just to say, we would like to encourage you to keep coming for our series. We are blessed with a lot of excellent minds. Our platform actually brings together is the best platform, I think, that brings together the best minds in Ghana. We have over 170 academics across all the regions in UK, and we're having a lot of interest coming from other parts of the world. So far, just to quickly interject, just bring this in regarding the conference, please. We will encourage you to make this, to market this conference. We already have 50 submissions, and then we have 5 expressions, keynotes, speakers who will be coming as well, government officials. We are having, other things. I mean, from all across, submissions are coming from all across the globe. We have from France, Japan, China, UK, Ireland, everywhere, Germany. We're having a lot of expressions. So please encourage your PhD students to submit as well. We want to make it one of the best conferences going forward. So thank you very much for sticking with us. Professor Sarpong, that has a very, very interesting work, and I really know that we're all going to benefit from it, from even the empirical side. I was taking notes. When you build your data set, I will be coming after that to see if I can do some trend analysis to see if that can inform strategy as well. So thank you for the insightful presentation. Yes.
Thank you very much, Dr. Attabuachi. Also, just to emphasize on what Dr. Attabuachi has said, the deadline for submission of papers for the conference has been extended to the 30th of April. So we still have some time to submit papers if we still have interest. And just to reiterate, the conference will be on the 19th to the 21st of June. So let's all take note if we haven't yet. Thank you so much. And going forward, what we have decided is the call for presentations will be done through the track chairs, but we will also put any reminders on the WhatsApp group for call for presentations, please. It is nothing temperamental. We're just asking you to propose any presentations, and we will pick it up and put you up for presentation. And thank you so much, everyone. Thank you once again, Professor Sarpong. And it's a goodbye from where we all sit. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.